Murphy. This is Ernie Cody with Bullseye Media, here with Dr. Mark Murphy, continuing our podcast series on how to grow your dental sleep practice. In where we left off last time, Dr. Murphy, you were talking about the low-hanging fruit of building a practice is to mine your patient base, make them aware through screening. I talked a little bit about how you can do that with marketing. You used a great example that if a practice has got 2,000 patients, you probably got about 500 that have sleep apnea, 400 are undiagnosed. Yep. If you get 200 of those, you got it made for the next 4 years.
Correct.
You can do a device a week for the next 4 years.
Simple math, but you got it.
What happens when that runs out?
Well, it's a great question. What happens when it runs out is you're now just relying on your new patient population flow, and unless you're seeing 100 of those a month, you've lost your source of these low-hanging fruits. So while I'm mining those patients, I would like to start to put in place, I guess I think of it as like shingles on a house, how one's layered over the next so that there's this continuum to keep the water flowing in that same direction. I want to keep patients flowing in the same direction, so I want to layer sourcing for patients. And for a lot of us, during those first couple or 3 years, 4 years maybe, while we're mining our own patients, it would be good to start to develop accessory channels for patient flow. And the three that always come to my mind that are kind of easy is doing something from a direct-to-consumer marketing standpoint in your area. And that's got a kind of a double-edged positive thing to it because first off, you might get some sleep patients from it. Second off, you might get some dental patients from it. Now for me, that's not very helpful because I don't do any dentistry, but if you're still practicing dentistry, you might get some dental patients from that. So you've got a double dip on that when you're doing some marketing, which is kind of cool. The second one would be if you probably have friends and neighbors who love and trust you, who practice in your area, classmates, whatever they might be, and they know you wouldn't steal their patients. And maybe they don't want to do sleep. And maybe they know they have to screen because the ADA has resolved back in 2017, 5 years ago. The ADA resolved that we should be screening our patients for sleep-related breathing disorders. So we know that's responsibility. You don't have to treat perio, but you got to screen for it. You don't have to do ortho, but you got to screen for it. So there's this responsibility to screen. You don't have to treat. I want some of my neighbors to not want to treat. I just want them to screen and send me an occasional patient. High five, another source. You can work. We'll talk about that in another podcast. And then finally, you can go to physicians and start to develop relationships. And that's a really fun conversation to have. And we'll have that one in one of these podcasts too. But today, let's talk about that first one, direct to consumer. It's not generally in our DNA as a dentist. That's why you have a business, Bullseye Media. There's a reason you have that business. If we were really good at marketing, you wouldn't exist. Simple as that. If you were really good at dentistry, we wouldn't exist. Okay, we have a mutually beneficial relationship. So I need to look at different ways of acquiring patients. And if we take the first tranche and we say we're going to talk about direct to consumer, I'm 65 years old. So the first thing that always comes to my mind would be mailing out some sort of cards to everybody in my... Cards are expensive. I hear about 0.5% response rates. You know, that's very, very small. And it wouldn't be very small if the payday were very large, and it's pretty good here, but it's not Inspire large. It's not $30,000 or $40,000. You know, it's $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000. So the payback's pretty good, but 0.5%. But it's expensive to send out those cards with mail and everything like that. And maybe it's not green for the environment, so it's not sustainable. There's lots of different things we talk about. Maybe I want to go on the radio. Maybe I want to go on television. That was a lot harder years ago. TV and radio weren't as segmented, especially television now, but I understand you've mentioned Guy Atris a couple of times. He does some really innovative things with TV marketing in his area where he can get on, I don't even know how we do this, but he can get on channels where programs are playing on pretty good networks in his local area for these local spots where instead of it being a Pillsbury ad that runs across the entire U.S., it's a spot that's going to be sold locally. Sure. But because of this digitization of the media delivery, I'm able to take this and send it to Bradenton, Florida, and I could send this over to here, Mark Murphy in Rochester Hills, and two different populations, two different commercials in that same 30-second spot.
Yep.
So cool. Radio, a little bit more general, but with Sirius and things like that, I noticed that when I travel and I listen to Pandora radio while I'm on the road, and I still haven't anteed up for the paid version, so I still get the occasional commercial. They're always local Michigan commercials. Because Pandora doesn't recognize my IP address has changed, and it thinks I'm still in Michigan. And I hear all these local ads, and I'm like, I'm in Florida. Why am I hearing this local ad? So And then, of course, there's all the things you could do passively with your Facebook page, Instagram, TikTok. I probably have some fun with TikTok.
Oh, I bet you would.
Dancing and all that stuff. I'm not into TikTok, so it's kind of a mystery to me right now.
I'll get you and Drake doing a TikTok.
Yeah, Drake and the dog doing some TikTok. I like it. So it's all those social media. So I think, and you're the expert in this part. I would never pretend to be. We've tried a couple of things. I tried to print in this local newspaper. They talked about promising all these great results. And of course, when I got no results, you probably know exactly what they're going to say. Well, you have to do this for 12 months.
Yeah, right.
If you do this for 12 months, you'll start to see results. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Yeah. So anyhow, it's trying to find, and this is where you'd have to find, in my opinion, because it's not our expertise, you have to find some sort of a marketing partner, someone who'd be collateral to your ideas and intentions to help figure out how you spend your money well. I mean, that's part and parcel of what you do, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is. We actually have what we call a growth calculator, and we ask GPs thinking about getting into sleep 3 simple questions that'll tell them how much money they need to budget. How many oral devices are they selling at the moment? And typically this is somebody who's new to sleep and they've already bought in. How many they want to sell a month?
Okay.
And what is their conversion rate? So of the people who come sit in the chair and they talk to them about sleep, end up getting an oral device. From that, we have got data from across the country of what an average touch is to a customer, the number of touches it takes. And we just, with the answers to those 3 questions, we spit out the bottom.
That's
what
cool.
The answer is. Yeah.
So you mean I could say like I do 2 devices a week.
Yep.
And I could say I'd like to do 4 devices a week. And I could say my conversion rate is X.
Right. And so
you could say we need to spend $1,500
I would ask you if you're and if somebody's coming into a sleep practice and they've already been referred, your conversion rate is going to be really, really high.
Yeah.
Right. But back to our last podcast about mining your patient base, that's going to be lower.
Oh yeah.
Because the number of people that you talk to and they say, I'll sit down and talk to you about an oral device. The number of those that converts probably closer to 50%, or it depends
right.
with each dentist what it is. But that's what you got to know, because then you have to back into, if I want to go from 5 to 10 and I'm converting 50 of them, then I've got to have a lot more touch points than if I'm converting 90 of them. So
sure.
Take that data in. But here's the interesting part about that is that number is typically, in the $1,000-ish range. If somebody wants to if they want to go from 4 sleep devices a month to 5, that's an easy one. But if they want to go from 5 to 10 or 10 to 20 or double it beyond that, it starts adding up. At the AADSM, we did a survey of attendees and we asked them, what is the average price they charge for a sleep device? And it was anywhere from like just under $3,000 to $6,000. It really varied, but
charge or collect?
Collect.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah. We asked that conversion question, and we asked what they were willing to spend. It was about 60% of attendees were willing to spend less than $100. A subset of that, 30%, were willing to spend less than $50.
Something that they could get $3,000
for. Something they could get $3,000 for. So I went through this.
You're out short to first as a marketing company.
Yeah, exactly. So I went through the average spend that a business is, or what your average business is willing to spend on a lead. Mm-hmm. And it's typically anywhere between 5 to 10%. Not a conversion, but a lead, depending on the industry. That math that I just described was 0.02%. If you do that,
not for a lead, for a conversion.
For a conversion, yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's that old adage where we didn't go to business school, so how we value, how we do the math, isn't always going to be logical because we're not thinking of it from a true business perspective. We're thinking of it as dentists.
Well, and also thinking about it from most dentists, what they've been doing for the last 20 years is that it is any number of things from search marketing to sponsoring a little league team or doing a radio ad or whatever it is. And it's less cost because you're not competing with all the other people that wanting to get into sleep or to get that sleep patient, I should say, ENTs, sleep test centers, sleep doctors, any number of people that you're competing for those same keywords. So you're competing for can't sleep at night, snore loudly,
Yep.
a CPAP alternative, things like that. So you're competing for expensive words. So that's part of it. And then another lesson that we've learned there, and you touched on this earlier, is that for a general practice looking to get into sleep, it's a good idea oftentimes to have your sleep advertising have a call tracker number on it. And this is what we do with all of our general practice dentists who are getting into sleep. So that when someone calls about sleep, the front desk gets a whisper that says sleep apnea line.
Oh, really?
Or something like that. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like a separate phone line. Holy cow.
Yeah, just a different number. Yeah. So then they know.
I feel so old sometimes.
Well, that's all right. But then they know with the person on the other end why they're calling, because you got 100 calls a day about people scheduling appointments and rescheduling appointments and insurance questions, and your brain is not your brain is in what you do all day long about general practice. So be able to have that whisper tone so that the front desk gets in that mindset of, okay, this is somebody calling about sleep. And because what we have often found is sometimes people will do ads, and if they don't do that, somebody will call and say, hey, I've got a CPAP, and the front desk will immediately say, I'm sorry, we don't sell CPAPs. We don't have anything to do with that. I'm sorry, I can't help you. But they need to be trained to say, oh, okay, well, you sound like you've been diagnosed with sleep apnea. Yes. Are you calling to learn about how you can replace that sleep apnea with an oral device or that sort of thing? So there are a number of things that practices can do to not only make that consumer outreach effective. Well, first of all, they have to be willing to spend the money on it, but to use the money wisely to get the right leads and then to convert those into patients. And I think we're going to do another podcast on CPL and CPA, cost per lead and cost per acquisition, which I think is really, really important for dentists to know, not just about their sleep, but about any advertising dollar that they spend. To be able to do that real simple math is important.
The thing that bubbled up for me while you were telling that story about the low numbers that somebody was willing to spend for a very high return on their investment is, I think, in the sales, marketing, product development world, anything that's businessy, even before somebody does a true careful analysis of the break-even expense on an activity or what the return on investment would be, they do what we call napkin math, where they'll say, well, if I could do this and get 10 times what I invested in it, it's a home run. And you might have a home run at 5 or 6 or 7, but the quick napkin math is if you get 10 times. So if you said to me, $3,000 for a case, and I spent $300 to get that case, in my mind, I do that all day long, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, just napkin math. And it's probably, might even be better than that, who knows? But the fact that you could start with a calculator to say, here's where you are, here's where you want to go, here's a path to get there, okay? It's a path that you're purchasing the route rather than all of the other kinds of things we've talked about, where we could go and work with my local dentist and find some physicians and do all that kind of stuff. But it's probably an important component strategically to be one of the tactics you use over time to build this sleep program, for sure.
Yeah, what's really important to consider, though, is that if it could be down the road that $300 gets you a $3,000 patient in the beginning, it's probably going to be $500, $600, $700, maybe $1,000.
Till you hone your skill sets.
Well, nobody knows you do it.
Right.
You're out there competing with these other entities, so you've got to do awareness. You've got to begin to invest in your search engine marketing so that you begin to rank for words like sleep apnea alternative and that sort of thing. You're not getting any referrals at that point. So 100% of your business in the beginning, other than what you've mined from your own patient database, like we talked about before, but your new patients, it's all new. As you begin to get referrals, and then your cost goes down, and you can spend $300 to get a $3,000 patient. But in the beginning, you're probably going to spend
5 or 6.
It might be, yeah.
But even that's 5 to 1.
Yeah,
it's huge.
Yeah.
The other thing about that is that when you think about what a dentist is doing every day, a dentist is in his practice, and the ADA data tells us that the average dentist does about $750,000 a year in collections. Have a nice day. They work about 1,536 hours. I'm sorry, I know this stuff off the top of my head. And they produce as an office about $428 an hour. And the general dentist in that average ADA practice, and nobody's average, of course, we're all beyond average, is producing $327 an hour, and the hygiene team is producing the rest because it's about a 2-to-1 mix. It's somewhere between 25 and 35% of the practice is hygiene revenue, and the rest is dentistry. And we could sit here all day and argue, do I put the exams on the hygiene side? Do I put the x-rays on the hygiene side? Don't get caught up in the details. I'll give you the whole $428 an hour. Hell, I'll pretend you have $500 an hour if you're the average AD practice. And I know you're not average, listeners. You're better than average. If I'm doing dental sleep medicine and I do a 15-minute consultation with a patient, I do a 45-minute exam, impressions, and a bite registration, and I do a 15-minute delivery and follow that patient up for another 15 minutes on some follow-up visit where I'm giving them a pulse oximeter or whatever I might be doing, I've maybe got 75, 90, 120 minutes. My math is we have about 90 minutes invested totally with the patient. If I look at my average reimbursement and it came out to be around $2,500 or $2,600, my production would be $1,667 per hour. That's more than 5 times what the average dentist is producing in their practice at $327 an hour. If I had a mic, I'd drop it. I do have a mic. I'm not going to drop it down.
Yeah, please don't drop the mic. We
holy shit! This. You know, and what would that? And when you were talking about the cost of acquisition and mining, I'm thinking to myself, well, it would be interesting to those dentists who said they wouldn't spend $50 or they wouldn't spend $100. What are they spending now to acquire their dental patients?
Yeah.
What's the value of a dental patient? I can tell you in the first year what it is. It'd be very easy. That's a math game, right? And if you had 1,500 patients that were active and they did $500 each, let's see, that'd be $750,000. So it'd be interesting. You could do some really interesting math very easily in terms of what's the crude value of a patient. If you say, well, a new patient needs more than that, great, triple it up. $1,500 a patient. Quadruple it up, $2,000 a patient. We're still not to the numbers we're talking about. So almost no matter how we shake it, the investment from a marketing perspective. And oh, by the way, if I do those other pathways, which we'll talk about on the podcast, meeting with my local dental friends and doing lunch and learns for them, or lunch and learns, not 180 like Drake does, but you know, I do some lunch and learns for them, or I do some lunch and learns for physicians. I get into the physician's office, developing those relationships. That takes money too. Yeah. Now it might not have been. You say, well, it only costs lunch, right? No. What's an hour of your exactly? What's an hour of your time worth? You could have been doing a crown prep, or you could have been doing a sleep case. So, yeah. Again, we didn't go to business school, so we make those kind of mistakes all the time. I've gone to the business school of hard knocks and learned a lot of these lessons, and I've made all the mistakes for sure.
All right. Well, we didn't hit on your mic drop, but very, very close. So thank you all for listening. Our next podcast will be on that third pillar of building your sleep dental practice. First is, what is it, Dr. Murphy?
First is mining your own easy opportunities. As you say, the low-hanging fruit, baby.
Low-hanging fruit. As we've talked about today, your direct-to-consumer. And next we'll talk about getting those doctor referrals. So Absolutely. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you in the next podcast.
Peace out, Holmes.